And we'll go ahead and start our webinar. We'll give it a minute or two for folks to join us before we start. Okay. Good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Jessica from Greenlight and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with Jessica Goodman launching her new book, They'll Never Catch Us. She's going to be talking tonight with Kelsey McKinney, so you are in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Jessica, Kelsey, and the team at Razorbill for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces right now, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Couple little housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see and hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first option is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like a speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A. You can find that by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And very importantly, tonight's featured book, They'll Never Catch Us, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person in our bookstore locations 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day of the week, and you can purchase Jessica's book and many others on site, or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US, and I'll drop that buy link in the chat in a moment. And excitingly, Jessica is stopping by our store tomorrow morning to sign copies of the book, so you can get a signed or even personalized book by request while supplies last. If you do want it personalized, I'd recommend you order that tonight. Make sure to indicate your signed copy request and any personalization in the order comments field at checkout when you order online, or look for signed copies when you visit the store. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Okay, some introductions. Our interviewer tonight is Kelsey McKinney. She's a freelance features writer and co-founder of Defector Media. She previously worked as a staff writer at Vox, Fusion, and Deadspin. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, GQ, Cosmopolitan, and New York Magazine, among other publications. Raised evangelical in North Texas, she now lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband and dog. Her debut novel, God Spare the Girls, just published this past June, and it's recommended by Good Housekeeping, Elle, Real Simple, Glamour, Refinery 29, Bustle, The Millions, Yahoo, LitHub, and many more. So be sure and check that out. Kelsey's going to be speaking tonight with our featured author, Jessica Goodman. She's the op-ed editor at Cosmopolitan. She's also a Greenlight neighbor, and she's the author previously of They Wish They Were Us, which she launched virtually with Greenlight last August. So we're here tonight to launch her new book, They'll Never Catch Us, which is a fast-paced thriller about two sisters vying for the top spot on their cross-country team until a teammate's disappearance throws their lives off course. No one knows what happened, but all eyes are on the Steckler sisters. So Jessica and Kelsey are going to jump right into conversation, and then they'll take your questions towards the end of the hour. Please join me in welcoming Jessica and Kelsey. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, Kelsey. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. For the people watching this who have not read your book in, I don't know, that's 6 hours since they were able to get it from the bookstore, do you want to give a little spiel?
Yes, I've been trying to perfect my elevator pitch, so hopefully, this will do the trick. So They'll Never Catch Us follows two sisters who are hyper competitive with one another, and they are aiming for the top spot on their small town's cross country team. And they are both very intense and determined, but they're really different, and they have really different personalities, as many sisters do. And everything kind of goes up in flames when a new girl comes to town, and she threatens to be better than both of them. And when she goes missing and disappears, everybody in the town turns to the Steckler sisters and thinks that they had something to do with it. It's definitely a thriller. It's a fast-paced murder mystery. I've heard people say it's fast-paced, and it also deals with themes of, you know, young women who are angry at the world and don't know what to do with these kinds of emotions that are, you know, often kind of tried to stamped out of young women. So that's the book.
Incredible. I mean, I will vouch for it being fast paced. I was lucky enough to get like an early galley, and I think I read it in like 8 hours or something insane. I just like didn't do any work and sat on my bed. So I do that's a warning for opening this book. Make sure you have some time ahead of you.
That's high praise. High praise.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it's such a fun book. My favorite question to ask everyone, because it's my own like little favorite thing, is what did you have first? Like,
oh, I
which
love that
part
question.
of the book did you have?
Yeah, I think for me it was the premise. Usually when I'm writing, like it's always about the premise. Like I know that I want to write a book about X, or that tells a story of X, and it's usually some really broad theme or broad kind of premise that I have to kind of like work my way back from. And so for this one, it came about because in like 2017, 2018, I was working as an editor at Cosmopolitan, and we were reporting on and hearing about this kind of like awful trend, so to say, of young women who would go out for runs and would disappear or be hurt or be murdered. And I just became obsessed with the idea that something that should be so freeing and so you know, healthy and you know, positive in your life can also be the thing that might get you killed. It just seems so unfair. And, you know, I'm not a runner in any way, but I just became obsessed with this idea. And I wanted to tell a story about what happens in a small town when a young woman goes missing while out on a run, and what that does to the town, but also the young women in that town who are trying to, you know, continue doing the thing that makes them feel good, which is running. It just seemed like such a natural story that would have a lot of tension in it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I feel like a lot of thrillers in general, the central question is like, who did the murder, right?
Yeah,
From the
who done
very
it?
get-go, it's like, who did it? And I feel like that was true for your first book, but in this one, it feels like the question is different that you're asking. Like the first question is like, what, I don't know, what is Stella doing, and like, what has she done, and what makes her this kind of like despised person? And I'm curious, like, did you know you were doing that? Did you mean to do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. So Stella is the older sister, and when we meet her in the beginning of the book, it is stated that she has this violent past, that she's done something bad, and that people in the town are scared of her, and that she's kind of this like you know, misfit, and people don't really respect her, even though she's like the fastest person on the team. Like everybody's scared of her and also wants to stay away from her. And that was very intentional, because I wanted her to be misunderstood in a lot of ways, because she is like she's one of our POV characters, and she's very central to the mystery. But I also wanted readers to really get to know Mila Keene. She is the new girl who comes to town. She's the girl who disappears. I really wanted people to know her and understand her, and feel like they were able to get to know her voice before she disappeared, because my biggest pet peeve in murder mysteries is like when the victim doesn't get a chance to speak for themselves. And I really wanted people to like feel like they knew her before she disappeared. So in order to have that happen, like we needed to layer in another mystery in the beginning of the book, so it helps drive the storytelling and drive the pacing. And so by creating this mystery of like of what is in Stella's past that makes her so you know, like reviled, like layering that mystery, I think helps keep just the pacing up, like from a technical standpoint. But you know, it's kind of one of these things, like I love talking about craft after I've already done the book. Like I don't think I could tell you that was what I was intending to do while I was writing the book. And I think that just that you know, that comes from like editors talking about like, okay, we need like something in here that like helps keep this moving. And for me, it's all about like creating a story in the beginning and then like backing into the like, you know, structural way to talk about it.
I don't know if craft questions are boring, but tell me more about like what that means for you. Like how rough are your rough drafts?
Oh my God. I call my rough drafts like zero drafts or like vomit drafts, because for me, the most important part of writing a book is like getting to the end of the first draft and seeing the words like the end on the page, because that gives me the confidence to keep going and actually like revise and finish the book and like make it really good. And so my first drafts are very rough and I don't show them to like anybody, and I just kind of like hoard them to myself. They feature a lot of like gibberish words, you know, and like big all caps paragraphs that are like, please come back and fix this on your next draft. And they're really just to like get the plot moving so I can get the story down and then go back and like fix everything later. So my editor will usually see like maybe my third or fourth draft, I would say.
Out of how many? Do you even know?
Oh my God. I mean, They Wish They Were Us probably went through like 25 drafts because I was working on that book for so long. But They'll Never Catch Us was probably all in all, maybe like 12 drafts.
That's wild.
I know. But I mean, like how many drafts did you have for God Spare the Girls? Probably so many.
Yeah, so many. I don't even know how many. But when I think about that in retrospect, I try to block it out. You know, I don't want to think about how much work it is.
I think it's the reason why, like when you're done with your book, or at least for me, like when I was finished editing it and like did the final pass on the interior of the book, I was like, okay, I'm not going to read this ever again. I was like, okay, maybe in like 10 years I could come back and like read it cover to cover. Like I've obviously gone back and like looked at passages and looked at certain things, but I think I would have a hard time like reading it for, like cover to cover right now. Too close to it.
Yeah, you've read it enough times, really, if you think about it.
Exactly. It's not my book anymore. It's for the readers.
Yeah, that's a weird distinction though that not everyone makes, right? Like a lot of people put their books out into the world and feel like they're still really close to them and very much like personal. So to be able to kind of release that must have taken a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know. I really feel like once when I'm like finished with the book, like it no longer belongs to me. And it belongs to the people who are, reading it and spending time with it and hopefully, like feeling connected to it. It's not mine anymore.
I want to go back earlier to the fact you mentioned offhand, so now I'm going to force you to go back to it, that you wanted people to feel really close to Mila and to like understand her more. And unlike your first book, this book has many perspectives and they're all in first person. How do you get that close to them? Like, how did you just distinguish those chapters from one another, I guess?
This was my first time writing in multiple POVs, like points of view. And the book is told in alternating chapters from the older sister Stella and the younger sister Ellie. And that was really intentional. First of all, like I wanted, just like from a craft perspective, like I wanted to challenge myself and just kind of see if I could do it, because those are some of my favorite books, when you're reading alternate perspectives. I think it's just so interesting to see like the same thing from multiple perspectives. And when you're reading a book that's one perspective, like, you're only getting one side of the story, and that can be really helpful and really awesome. But you can also be left wondering like, well, is that really how it happened? Or is this just how this character interpreted everything? So for this, I really wanted Stella and Ellie to have different voices. Like I really wanted, like I've said this before, but I think the best multiple POV books are the ones where you could like pick it up and open a random page and know exactly who's speaking. And I really wanted them to be different and have different takes on things and have their different personalities like really shine through, and their different perspectives on people. I wanted that to shine through too. But they are sisters, and you have a sister, I have a sister. I think like there are a lot of similarities in the way that sisters like talk and the way that sisters emote in some ways, not always. If you've read the book, you'll know that they emote very differently, but there are a lot of similarities in language and like voice and tone. So I think they do, you can see their similarities as well as their differences, and that was just as important, I think, to show like how they are really close in a lot of ways, even when they seem like they're not.
When I first started reading, like when I got to the second chapter and realized that we were the second section, when it switches perspectives, I was like, how the hell is she going to do this? Because one, I don't know how to do that. And two, my sister and I speak with like the same weird cadences and the same weird pronunciations. Like all of our vocabulary is the same. So I was like, how is she going to make this sound so different for each of them. But I think kind of the nice thing about working with teens is that like their personalities are so distilled and so strong, right? Like both of these girls are the sharpest version of themselves that they'll ever be. And I loved that you were able to kind of make those sections look really different from one another.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I feel like the differences really come through in their personalities rather than like the style and voice and tone. And that just might be like me as a writer thing too. But I think it's like, I think it's true to the nature of like families as well. Yeah.
We love sisters. We love that they hate each other.
Sisters. Well, I think it's like up for debate if they like hate each other, but they definitely feel like they hate each other at a lot of points. But like, I mean, their relationship is so complex and so like layered in a lot of ways, which felt just really like true and real for me. But they say that they hate each other, which is like so real for like teenage sisters, you know, but it's like their actions prove otherwise, you know.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you have your own sister read it? Has she read it already?
I don't think she's read it yet. I gave her a copy and it's dedicated to her. She might even be watching now. If she is, hello, I love you. But yeah, I think she's reading it now as we speak. When did your sister read your book?
I gave it, so my book has like it centers on two sisters, just like this book, but only one point of view. I gave it to her before I like went to agents with it, because I was like, I want to make sure that it's not too close to home. And my sister doesn't read very much. So I was like, if Shelby will read it, then it's probably good.
That's very smart. And like, did she ask you to like change anything?
No, she was like, I loved it. It's great.
Perfect. It is great. It is great. Highly recommend this book.
Yelled at each other all growing up, and now having her read my work before it goes out.
I mean, that's the beauty of like growing up so close to someone, like whether close in age or just close in relationship. Like, I think the beauty of the beauty of sisterhood, but like one of the best things about being a sister and like being a sibling is just that like there's like an unspoken language of like not having to explain everything or not having to like, you know, couch anything. You're just like this, like, you know exactly who each other are and like what to expect of each other. And I think that only comes with like so much time and like having lived through so much stuff. Like, I don't know if I could say that when I was like 15, but now that I'm in my 30s, like, it, you know, it feels much more, you know, like cozy and like settled into.
But that's, I mean, so the girls in your book are what? They're a year apart, a year and a half?
They're 14 months apart. Yeah.
14 months apart. And that's like such a competitive age. Like my sister and I are 2.5 years apart, and we were competitive in some ways. And so I'm like, I can't imagine being 1 year apart. How did you balance like wanting to show the reader, because obviously in their voices, they're like, she's the worst, I'm so mad at her. But how did you make sure that those sections also made it clear that they loved each other?
Oh, that's a great point. I don't think I was doing that intentionally. Like, I think I was just like really writing from a place of like raw emotion, which like I just love like the idea of YA being able to do that, because it's like there, you never have as like intense emotions or feelings as you do when you're like 16 or 17 years old, and just getting to like relive those through these characters is like, for me, like, I love it. You know, I feel like I can like get a lot out there. And so like, yeah, it wasn't intentional. Like, I was really just trying to put myself in these girls' heads and be like, what would they be feeling? Like, what would they be thinking? And I think a lot of their love for each other like does come through in their actions. Like I think I said this before, but like, you know, they say that they are furious and that they hate the other person and that like there's no one in the world who like betrays them more, but their actions are like totally, they indicate the exact opposite. You know, like when one of them like needs help, the other one is there like in a heartbeat. It's like not even a question, you know. And I think that is, it's like, it's kind of like, you know, you're doing the opposite. Like you're showing, not telling. Like the girls are telling you they hate each other, but they're showing you that they love each other. And that felt like very, you know, consistent with real life, I think, for me.
I agree with that. Was it different writing about sisters this time?
Yeah, it was super different. In They Wish They Were Us, the main character, Jill, has a younger brother and she feels like very protective over him and kind of like, you know, classic big sister, like wants to protect him from the dangers that she's already been through. And it kind of mirrors another brother sister relationship within that book too. And I, this one was like in They Wish They Were Us, like the main central relationships I think are between the female friendships. And those friendships are really intense and dynamic, and they hate each other, and like they come back together and also like, you know, bury their hatchets in their own ways. But with sisters, I really wanted to make the point that like their relationship is like indestructible. Like no matter what happens, like they will always be there for each other. And I think with friendship, it's like, I just keep pointing back because it's like back there, but like with friendship, it's kind of like you always have the option to bail out. Like, you know, you say you don't, and you know, like best friends forever or whatever, but you do. There is always the chance that you can bail out. But in sisters, I think not all, but in a lot of sisterly and, you know, familial relationships, like the option of bailing out is, you know, not really there, or it feels like it's not in some ways. And there is like a different kind of tension there when you're like, I have to live with this person for the rest of my life. What do I how do I move past a transgression, you know? And I think that these sisters like really fight for their relationship in a lot of ways. And you know, you see them do that with the parents as well. And I mean, I think that's just like the nature of family, you know, like it's not, this is not like an exclusive, this concept is not exclusive to sisters. It's like, what do you do if family hurts you? Like, what do you do if you've hurt family? Like, how do you move on from that in a way that feels healthy and productive? And I've said this before, but I really wanted them to fight with each other because I think it's really important to have like healthy examples of fighting. Like fighting is something that we do all the time. Sorry, there's a bug in my face, but like fighting is something we do all the time. And I think young women especially are told not to fight, that fighting is bad, that arguing is bad, that getting angry is bad. But like that's so false, because anger is like a totally normal emotion, and like fighting is really, it can be really productive and really healthy. And so I wanted to show these girls fighting in a way that like moved their relationship forward and actually got them to like establish more trust and reliance on one another. Because, you know, I feel like I couldn't really pinpoint examples that I felt like that I could recall from like my own childhood of like watching people fight and then coming out like in a better place. So I was hoping to do that here.
I think you did. I mean, I think what you're saying about like sisterhood being this kind of lifelong, hopefully, bond that you have with your sibling is the converse of that, right? Is that like, you know, that they're going to have to see you every Christmas forever. So if you say something really mean, you're like, but you have to love me. You're my family, right? Like there's this kind of like, you can be sharper than you ever would with a friend.
Totally.
And I think that's,
yeah.
It's part of the fun of this book is that like, they are really sharp with each other. And it's like, they're kind of learning, like your sibling is also the person that teaches you how to fight with other people. So it's like, you have,
oh my God, totally,
time figuring it out.
I was just talking with someone today who was saying that they, we were talking about this exact concept, and they were saying like, oh my God, like I'm now realizing in this very moment that like the reason why I have trouble confronting other women is because I didn't grow up with a sister. And I'm like, oh, maybe like that's like pretty good self-analysis. But you know, I have friends that like I fight with, and we always say like we fight with each other like sisters. And I think we're able to do that and still be so close because we both have sisters, and like we both have like, you know, a history of being able to do that and still like feel so close to the other person and move on from that.
There's also like, at least for me and my sister, our fights were like very personal, right? And a lot of your life as a child, when you have a close in age sister, is trying to separate yourself from the like perceptions of your sister that other people have. And that's something that I think you did a really good job of, is that both of these girls are just desperate to not be associated with the other one, right? Even though the name on the back of their jerseys is the same, they're like, please, no, not her.
Yeah, I mean, these sisters are so different in almost every way. or so they think they're really different. And I wanted them to kind of like come around on that also and realize what they had in common was way more than they thought that they did.
What else? What do you want to talk about? You got anything good?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. Well, can you also give the elevator pitch for your book? Because it's really different than mine, but I feel like there are so many similarities. And if people are here who might enjoy my book, like I feel like they would really like yours too.
Oh, sure. So my book is adult fiction, but the protagonist is 18 years old. And it is the story about two girls who are the daughters, they're sisters, and they're the daughters of a megachurch evangelical pastor who has a huge platform and is very, very famous and is caught with a terrible secret. And that is kind of where the book goes forth from there, is this like one summer that's going to determine the rest of their lives, kind of.
Yeah, I love your book too, because it's so like intimate and it's just really beautifully written. But it's just really intimate, and you just get so inside this like one relationship, which is really fun. But the tension in it made me like, there is so much like incredibly well placed tension, and I'm curious if you ever thought about like writing a thriller.
No, I haven't. But something that I thought a lot about when we were doing edits on my book is mainly because I was forced by my editor, not because I'm naturally good at this, was the kind of setup that thrillers have, I think works for all fiction, in that like you need to be asking questions consistently and you need to be revealing answers consistently. So even though like, I mean, that's just kind of the basics of like how a plot works, right? It's like you have to set things up and then solve them. And I think that while I knew that in theory, I think when I was writing early on, I was just writing things that I thought sounded good and that I thought were like very beautiful. And it turns out that like beauty does not sustain a narrative. You have to actually like inject some plot there. So I've read a lot of thrillers. I grew up like reading murders, but all the Agatha Christie books I like devoured whole. So I think somewhere deep inside of me is that like desire for there to be some like unresolvable question on page one, right? Which is essentially every thriller.
Yeah, I feel like that like desire to like not think about plot is like so common in so many writers. Like when I was writing They Wish They Were Us, I like didn't think about plot. I didn't think about genre. Like I didn't think about like anything about the story. I was just like, I want to play around in this world and like work with these characters and these people. And when I started working on They'll Never Catch Us, it was like I really had to like talk to my editor because I had never like drafted a book from the beginning like on my own, you know, like or no, I shouldn't say it like that. Like I've never drafted a book with the intention of like having it be edited and like knowing that it was going to be published and like needing to start from square one with like a real plan, you know, like I didn't have the luxury of just kind of like waiting around and like waiting for the story to hit me. It was like I needed to do it, and I needed to do it within 4 months. And
yeah, that's like a deadline, baby.
That was a deadline, and it was a really intense experience. And like, thankfully, I work very well under deadline, and I'm sure you do too, from having worked in media for so long. But like the idea of like starting a plot from scratch, it was totally foreign to me. And you know, it was the first time that I really tried to like write an outline for a book. And then very quickly realized that the outline I had created would not sustain me for a whole book and had to go like back to the drawing board. But I think the beauty of writing novels is that like, at least for me, I feel like I'm getting better with every single one. Like, I feel like I'm getting better with not only like my ability to plot and structure books, but also like just the prose. Like, you know, I think it's getting stronger and stronger, which is really exciting as I work on my third book, which is going to come out next summer. Also a YA thriller. And I just feel like that's the beauty of this, you know, this craft, this like art that we make, is that, you know, you get to keep working on it and, you know, putting it out there for people to engage with in a way that feels really unique and special. Because like, at least for me, I know reading is such like an intimate personal thing that I do. And, you know, being able to put these books out there and hear directly from readers, you know, in whatever format or you know, media form is, you know, it's breathtaking. Like it's so humbling and exciting. And it all starts with trying to figure out what the hell you're trying to say in this plot, you know?
I mean, I think plot is like, at least to a lot of writers, is kind of like the dirty word, right? Because they want to focus on like, I don't know, lyricism or diction or something. But I think that's something that you are really, I think you're right. I think the prose and the plot of this book are better than your first one, which is like upsetting because the first one is done, but great news for your third book. But you said something that is like the complete opposite of something you said earlier. And it's that you said you were a vomit drafter. And then you're also saying that you have this like intense outline. I'm asking for myself, how are you doing that?
Okay, yeah. Let me break this down a little bit because you did catch me in a lie. So I did write an outline for They'll Never Catch Us. It was like how I got my editor on board with the book. I like wrote, I don't know, maybe like a 5-page outline. So it wasn't like that intense. It was basically just like big beats of the story. She was like, sure, like go ahead and write it, and like we'll see what happens. As I started to work through this outline, I realized that like it was just not going to like get me over the finish line. Like there wasn't enough stuff there. And it was like not an outline that you could like, it was not a blueprint to like creating a novel. You know, like I feel like some writers are like, I plot everything out. I have a 20-page outline, and like it's basically, you know, a first draft, and like we go from there. So this was not that. And I was trying to do like the outline thing again with my book, my third book, The Counselors, because that was also on a really fast deadline. And it was the same kind of thing. Like I basically like plotted out the first act, and I knew where I wanted to end up. Like I knew who I wanted to be the big bad, and I knew what the final kind of like big moments would be, but like the whole middle was just like a mess. And I had to kind of like wade through that muck and mess through writing, you know, just through getting words down. And if you follow me on Instagram, like I've been posting like Instagram stories about like my daily word counts and like how I moved through the draft. And a lot of that was just like trying to hold myself accountable for getting the words down. But I also wanted to show people that like this is a process, you know, like it takes a long time to get it right. And often like, you know, the first draft is not great and it's not what the final draft will be, but you need to go through that mess and that kind of just like disaster area in order to get to the final product. Like I really believe that, you know, like I try not to take any, like I try not to be too frustrated with my messy first drafts, because I know that they're like the foundation and the building blocks, and that, you know, nobody has to see them except my editor and my agent, and we can kind of all work together in a little cave to come out with this like beautiful shiny thing. Because, you know, readers just see the final product and they're like, oh my God, you know, it's a final book, it's everything. But what's not there is the many, many failed chapters, the hundreds of thousands of words that are, you know, in some graveyard Word doc that will never see the light of day. And, you know, those words that don't get used anywhere, like I'm still proud of them because they, you know, like helped get us here. Though I'm basically just right now giving myself a pep talk to like go back and because I am due to revise my third book like pretty soon. Like now as we speak. So this is really just me giving myself a pep talk to like get back in the trenches with the counselors and get back to work.
I think that's like, I'm really inspired by your Instagram posts where you're like, I wrote 1,200 words today or whatever, because it is, I mean, these girls are distance runners. I've never been a distance runner because I'm an awful runner. And I never understood it. I was like, how can you run every day? Like, aren't you exhausted? And I think like, I also feel that way looking at your writing numbers, to be absolutely clear. I'm like, how can you do this? Aren't you exhausted? But I think it's like a really beautiful kind of parallel with what the girls are doing in the book, of this, like just consistently like hitting the pavement and knowing that like that consistency is going to pay off in the end.
That's such an interesting parallel. I never even thought about it because I am not a runner at all. And I actually had to do like quite a bit of research to like make sure that I wasn't like totally messing up. So shout out to cross country TikTok for really helping me get into the mindset of teenage girls who run cross country. They are like heroes in so many ways. But yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think in my writing process, I'm like desperate to get words on the page. like I have like a hunger and a desperation to move forward. And I think that's just like my personality in this like arena. Like I am just like hungry for more words and to move the projects along because I'm excited about them and I want to get them out to readers. And it just feels like something that I have to do. And also like I recently quit my day job to do this full time. So now it is like, I'm like trying to give myself like more time and energy and space to do this. And it feels so invigorating to like be able to do this, in the time frame that I want to. And it's really exciting.
I mean,
it's hard though. I want to say it's hard. Like it's not like I'm just kind of like cruising around. Like it's work and it feels great. It just feels good. But it is, it's hard work. So.
But I think that's a huge misconception I had about how books work, at least before I wrote one, is that I kind of thought that like people like you were just a genius and you sat down and you typed, "They'll never catch us," into a Word document. And then you straight typed the next, 80,000, 90,000 words, just right. And I was like, it's so weird that my like tries at this aren't working.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. But it feels so good when you're done, and I think like being able to do it once just makes you feel even more excited about doing it again. And like having the confidence that you can do it. And also like for me, a lot of writing is like letting go of my own like self-consciousness. And like, I think when I first started writing fiction, I was so embarrassed, even though like nobody was reading it. Like I was just like embarrassed. I was like, what if someone finds this? And like, it's so bad. And I think just like getting over that has been so helpful for my work ethic, and just realizing that like, I don't have to show it to anyone, and like, no one's going to read it. And like, practice makes perfect kind of. And like the first draft will never be good. And like, all that stuff is fine. And just like, being able to move on from that and free yourself up to make mistakes in the early drafts is like such a blessing.
It's funny because I also felt that embarrassment and had like completely forgotten about it, that I was like so deeply embarrassed about writing fiction. And I've never like really thought about this before. So we're going to work through something here really quick. But I think like I write a lot of nonfiction online, right? And some of that is personal and true about me. The book is fake, right? All of these books are fake, but it's like scarier in some ways because like your subconscious leaks out all over this book and then people are reading that. So I think what's like, for me, what I was so embarrassed about was I was like, oh, like one, who am I to try to do this? And two, what will people see that I don't even know is there?
Yeah, I think also like in general, I think people underestimate like female writers a lot and will often just assume that like every book written by a woman is autobiographical.
Yeah.
Like none of my books are autobiographical. Like of course there are some similarities in terms of like, where things are set. Like, yeah, I've been there, I've lived there, like whatever. But like my books are not autobiographical. Like Stella and Ellie are not. They are not my family, and I think it's like really important to make that distinction because people so often just assume that female writers are writing from a place of like, I just changed the name, but like, this is me. And that's just not true. And I think that like does such a disservice to women writers who like, of course we can make things up. Like, of course we can enter the world of fiction that was for so long dominated by men. And, I love like turning that on its head, and just be like, I don't know. I get worked up about that.
I think you're right. I think I intentionally am not asking you any questions about like, did you run? Is your sister exactly like this? Because that is people's first inclination is like, oh, there must be some truth in this. So I guess, and there is, right? So I guess a question I do have for you is like, what do you think the truth in this book is that's like true for you? Right? Like, is there like maybe a question or like a theme or something?
Yeah, I think there are a couple. I think like, obviously, like the idea that like sisterhood is an unbreakable bond. Like, I think that was like a real message that I wanted to get across because I just love it. And I think it's important. And I think it's like, I just think it's like really cool to show like messy sisters who like find each other at the end and like can move forward in a lot of ways. So that's one of them. I think also like I really wanted to show like rage-filled, angry girls who are like put in boxes that feel tight and tiny and that they want to like explode out of. Like I wanted these girls to feel constrained, and I wanted to create a setting that made the reader feel claustrophobic for them. And then I wanted to give them like exit strategies when they thought that they had none. And I think that like that is just a theme in They Wish They Were Us as well. Like it's kind of something that runs throughout my work of like giving young women agency, or allowing them to find their own agency in a world where they thought they had none. I think that message is important, especially because I'm speaking to like a teenage, audience. Like this is a young adult book. And like, I felt for so long as a teenage girl, like I didn't have that message. It kind of felt like the world was like put on me and I had to like fit into it. And like, I just kind of had to go with the flow and like do, like fit into boxes, and I don't think it was until much, much later in my life that I realized that like that wasn't necessarily the case, and that you could break down walls and say no to things, and like you didn't have to be a people pleaser all the time, and I think it's like I love writing girls who find that out earlier than I did, and that they can take that knowledge and like bring it into their high school lives, which are like so messy. And I love when they just make mistakes and do like crazy things that I never would have done when I was a teenager.
It's so hard to be a teen. Like
Yeah.
one of the things I love about your books is that like these girls do have more agency than like you felt like you had, and certainly than I felt like I had, but they still feel so stuck, right? And that's like the hallmark of being a teen, is like you just don't control your own life yet, and you want to so badly.
You want to so badly, and you really don't want the adults in your life to control it. And I think, something in YA is like, we always talk about like, how can you get the adults out of the room like as quickly as possible? Like, how can they not be central to the story? And, a lot of people will send them to like boarding school, or like my third book is set at a summer camp. Like, like a lot of the teens are not with their parents in that book. But when you set it in like a traditional high school, or like a high school setting where like a lot of the families are stable and intact, it's kind of like, you end up with a lot of bad parents, because just for the sake of storytelling. And the parents in this book have a lot of issues and, qualms with one another as well. But I think it's like, it's just a fun sandbox to play around in, because you want the girls to like go out on their own. And a lot of times that means that they like break a lot of rules, and like do things they're not supposed to do, because you don't want them, like, you don't want their parents looking over their shoulders the whole time. It's not interesting. It's not good storytelling.
I mean, that's the benefit of the cross country too, I guess, is that it's like all those kids are up early in the morning and they're gone.
Totally. And they're like, I mean, cross country is such a specific sport, because like for most of the race, like most of the time that you're being athletic, like you're not seen. You're like in the woods, there are no spectators. So it's kind of like you go into the woods and like your coach doesn't know like what happens on the course,
Right.
It's like you and the other girls, and sometimes those girls aren't so nice to you.
Mm-hmm. I did think that was something really great about this book, is that because of the setup, because that like at some point in the past, there have been murders of young girls in this town. Every time they're on a run, you're like, oh no, right? Like there's this like built-in tension to the book.
I'm glad that came across. Yeah.
It worked for me.
Oh, good.
I think we should start taking some of these questions. Yeah. You want to take some?
Yeah. These are
okay.
good. Oh, these are good ones.
Yeah. Avery asked you, did any specific book inspire you to write thrillers?
Oh my God. Yes. 100% Gone Girl, Gillian Flynn, best thriller of all time. If you haven't read it, like, where have you been, hiding under a rock? I mean, yeah, Gillian Flynn is like my like North Star when it comes to thrillers. Gone Girl was like a gateway drug for me. And then I read all of her other ones and have been just the biggest fan.
Incredible. I love Gone Girl too. It's a great book.
It's so good. And I read it probably like once every other year, and I still find like new things to love about it and inspiration in it. But in terms of YA, like I think Tiffany Jackson is like one of the masters of it. She has a new book out in September called White Smoke that I haven't read yet, but I'm really excited about. And her last book, Grown, which I think is out in paperback today, is amazing. And she's so good too. So
so much tension.
So much tension.
Sarah has given us a hot topic. How do you feel about sex and explicit writing in literature?
I love it. I think it's great. I think there's a time and a place for it. Like if you're reading a romance book, like of course you want the sexy time. Like that's what you're there for. And in YA, it's interesting. I have this conversation a lot with my editors my agent about like, how much do you want to include? There's this thing where, you often will fade to black in YA sex scenes, which basically means you kind of like right into it. And then, you kind of stop. Yourself. You distance yourself. Exactly. And in my books, like I have included sex scenes and I have included like the girls engaging in like self-pleasure. And I think that is really important because it's just like these natural things that like teenage girls are dealing with. And it feels, it would feel like inauthentic not to mention any of that stuff at all. But your book is like very much about sex. Well, not very much, but like, sex plays like such an interesting role in it because it's about an evangelical family and an evangelical pastor and like what sex means in a lot of ways. So, I mean, like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's funny because I have not like, there's only one sex scene in my book, but like the whole undercarriage almost of the plot is that like these girls have been brought up in a very strict purity culture that like has taught them that the sex and anything explicit is bad. And something I thought about a lot and something I like, my real answer to what do I think about this is I don't think anything belongs in a book that doesn't either create tension or advance the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we say that sex scenes are gratuitous, we don't mean that they like describe too much. We mean that they don't do anything. So
totally.
In the same way that if you have like a passage that's just like, I'm going to describe this pillow to you for 800 words, you're like, why? I don't want that. Like it's not.
I totally agree.
Understand. Yeah. So I mean, I love to read a sex scene in a book as long as it has a purpose there, as long as its meaning has something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. Lauren has 2 questions. Her first is, how do you come up with such relatable characters? I always feel invested in your characters.
That's really kind. Thank you, Lauren. I think whenever I start writing characters, like my favorite thing to do is like include very small, very real traits and observations that I find in real people. And I'm not like making a list and being really formal about it, but I think the way to create like authentic characters who feel 3D is to give them like weird things that your friends do, or like weird things that you notice about people, like when you're walking down the street or when you're seeing them in a class or something like that. Like one of my friends has a very specific way of eating pizza. Like it's just very specific. And like all of our friends know exactly, like when she gets pizza, we know exactly how she's going to eat it. And like that, to me, that is like, not only like, just like a funny, quirky thing that could be like cool and descriptive, but like the fact that I know that about her, like says a lot about our relationship and like, and that, that kind of interaction. So I think like the best writers are also the best observers. What do you think?
I think that's true. I mean, I think relatable is like a tricky thing because like you can't, I think anything that is specific enough will feel relatable, right? Like when you try to use like broad, and that's what you're saying too, when you try to use like a broad brush and say like, oh, she's insecure, right? Like that doesn't do much. But if you say like, oh, she's constantly checking her like cover up, that it tells you much more. And it's something that even if you maybe don't check your cover up every 20 minutes, you're like, oh, that's relatable to me. Like I too feel insecure. So it's like, the pizza.
Yeah, you know what it means.
Right. You know exactly what those details mean. And I think that's something I think about a lot too, is like, how do you pick details for characters that not only make sense for them, but that indicate something bigger about who they are. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Pizza one being like quirky girl.
Manic pixie pizza girl.
Okay, we have more. Was it hard to write from the perspective of young teenage girls? If so, what was the hardest part? This is from JC.
I think it honestly, like I don't feel like it's hard. Like I feel very in touch with my like teenage self, or like the way that I feel very in touch with the emotions that I felt as a teenager. Like I can recall those very easily. I don't know what that says about me, but like I just can like get into that mindset quite easily. So it's not hard to imagine like what my characters would feel and think in certain moments, or certain plot points. But I find it really hard to like I find it really hard to like think about being a teenager in 2021. So like because of that, like I am not interested in like including really specific social media mentions or like slang or things that like really date the book in a specific year, because I think I think I would do a bad job of that and make it feel really inauthentic. Like some people can do like are great at like including social media and like various kinds of new platforms that like I don't even know exist. So that's the stuff that like I really try to stay away from, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I find it very hard to think about being a teen in general. Yeah. When I watched Pen 15, I was like, wow, I had repressed so much. Just forgot about this deep fear.
Great show.
Mm-hmm. Anna asks you, do you think setting your stories in a specific place, town, city is important, or can the place be vague / nameless if the characters and plot are front and center? How do you feel about place versus character?
That's a great question. I think there are some authors who are really amazing at just kind of like plopping a story anywhere. Like Courtney Summers is one of my favorite YA authors. She writes young adult thrillers as well. And I heard her once talk about like one of her best books, I think, is this book Sadie. And it like the setting is like not important at all. Like I think it's in Colorado, but like I have like no recollection really of like what the setting is or does for the story. And I think that like she supplements that with just like incredible character development, and you're like so in on this person's relationship with other people. The setting doesn't matter, it really doesn't. But for me, I'm like fascinated by setting, and I am definitely the kind of writer that's like, setting is another character in my book. And I think I really hope that comes across with this book, They'll Never Catch Us, because I was very intentional about setting it in a small mountain town that is kind of like half gentrified, half not, and really struggling with its identity and also economic issues, about like what the future of the town looks like versus what the past of the town is actually like, and how they marry those two complicated truths. And yeah, I think I'm just interested in it, and it feels it feels right for me when I'm writing. My next book is also very set in place, and I think if you've read They Wish They Were Us, you can also agree that it's like I'm from Long Island, and so I was like so into writing a Long Island book, and I have friends and readers who live in Long Island, and they have been like, wow, was this about this one, like did you set this like based on this one town? And I'm like, yes I did. So to me, that's like I did a good job because they could like identify it.
Yeah. I love that about your books though, that like you can like taste the seawater in your first,
I hope so.
And in this one you can like feel the terrible trees.
I think I just like love that in reading too. Like I just finished Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is like so fantastic. It's a great like summer kind of beach read, that's very deep and like heartbreaking in a lot of ways. It's also like a family saga book, if that's up your alley. And it's set in Malibu, and you can taste the sea, like you can feel the ocean breeze, like you are standing on the beach with that family ready to go surfing. And I mean, what a magical thing. Like books are supposed to transport you somewhere else. I think like the best books you get lost in. And for me, like writing that is about setting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like setting too. I think it's like, to me, I want, in order to ask like bigger questions and to give the reader more space to do that, I want it to be as specific as possible. But also I like when you meet someone and you find out they're from Long Island, that tells you things about them. And the same is true for a book, right? You want to know kind of, did this person grow up by water or not? I do. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, me too.
Were you on a lot of boats or not? They say as someone from the middle of the country.
They're like water in Texas.
Yeah, it's all fake, but it's there. Okay. Lauren also asks, when you're writing, do you tend to take on your characters' moods in real life? I feel like this happens to me as a reader, so I'm curious how it is for you as a writer.
Oh my gosh, that's such an interesting question. No, I don't. And I think, and I think that's because of the way that the way that my writing schedule has been structured. For most of the time that I was working on They Wish They Were Us and They'll Never Catch Us, I was also working at Cosmopolitan in a very demanding job that required my full attention from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I would work on these books in the mornings, from like 7 to 9 a.m. usually. And I didn't really have the time to kind of like sit in that space. Like I really had to just like change my mindset very quickly. So no, I don't, but I have had that experience of being a reader and feeling like melancholy because, the character that I'm reading about is, or just feeling like really excited by what I've read. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also don't feel that. I don't feel the things that my characters feel, but I do feel exhausted. So like, I feel like if you're writing a really intensely emotional scene, right? It's not that I feel like sad and feel like, oh, I'm going to weep, as much as it's like at the end of it, I feel exhausted in the same way you feel exhausted at the end of a fight, right? Where you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I think
it's also like, in my third book, like I'm including, I'm including
Perfect.
like
Lauren also wants a sneak peek into your next book. So
great. Okay. Let me try to give the elevator pitch for this book because I've only done it like once or twice. So, okay. My third book is called The Counselors, and it's going to come out next summer. So another summer thriller, which is very exciting. It is set at a sleepaway camp in New England, and it follows Goldie Easton, who is she just finished her senior year. And I say it in air quotes because she's had a very tumultuous year. And she's kind of like a local in this rundown town. And she gets to go to this like very exclusive, fancy sleepaway camp in her town. She's been going there her whole life because her parents work there. And while she's been at this camp, she has become best friends with these very, Upper East Side kind of girls. And she always feels kind of out of place at this camp. But it's also the one place that she really feels like she belongs because she's not very well liked in her town. And at the start of the book, she's had this tumultuous senior year, and she's keeping secrets from her best friends, these girls that she is a counselor with at camp. She's keeping all these secrets. She's keeping everything hidden. And very soon after the book starts, her ex-boyfriend winds up dead at camp, on camp property. And so the book follows, her, like the quest to figure out who did this and what it means for the camp. It definitely has a lot of similar themes that I have been writing about, young female characters finding agency over their own lives. There's a lot of like class and privilege issues that come up and conflict between the small town and the camp that exists within it and the way that they interact with one another. So again, setting is like very, it's very important to the book. It's like the book is like, it's very claustrophobic because you're like in this one area for the whole time.
The last question, which I think you can use for your next book to answer too, is how do you decide which tense to write in, first versus third? Anna says this is one she struggles with too in her own writing. So
I struggle
also in first person.
My next book is also in first person. But I totally struggle with this too because, well, it's interesting. Like when I sit down to write, I just kind of like naturally write in first person. It's like not something I really think about. I just kind of like go. And then I read third person books and I'm like, I should try to do this. And then like, I'm, working on ideas for like, other projects. And I've like tried the third person out. And I just always revert back to first person when I'm not paying attention really. So I kind of think it's just like instinctual, and maybe one day I'll like be really intentional about doing third person. But for now, I guess I'm sticking with first.
Well, I think that's perfect. We're right at 8:30.
Oh, great.
Nice timing, guys.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you so much for this conversation, for letting us spend time with you and talk about They'll Never Catch Us. I put the link in the chat once more. And if you do place your order tonight, you could get your book signed by Jessica and personalized when she comes by tomorrow. So thank you guys both so much for all of your work and for this conversation.
Thank
And
you so much for
congratulations.
hosting. Thank you for having us, Greenlight, and thank you to Kelsey for facilitating this wonderful conversation. I'm just so delighted.
Thank you for writing this great book.
All right. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.